The Reincarnation Curse. Early one morning, Kiên stepped outside and noticed a small child, around 3-4 years old, curled up in front of his house. The boy looked pale and weak, barely able to move. Feeling pity, Kiên brought him inside. His father, Mr. Hua, frowned at the sight and warned, "You should never feed a stranger immediately. It's an old belief if you do, a spirit might attach itself to you." Kiên dismissed it as mere superstition. As he tried to feed the child, he noticed something odd. The boy, named Dewey, refused everything except plain white rice. Even when Kiên put meat and vegetables in his bowl, Dewey would eat around them, leaving the food untouched. Kiên thought it was just a strange habit, but as the days passed, more peculiar things happened. With no sign of missing child reports, Kiên decided to bring Dewey back to the city with him. At his boarding house, a woman who worked as a shaman took one look at Dewey and muttered, "That boy, something isn't right." When Kiên asked what she meant, she simply shook her head and walked away. At first, Kiên ignored her words, but then the eerie incidents increased. Dewey rarely spoke, yet his gaze often lingered on empty spaces as if watching unseen figures. At night, Kiên would sometimes wake up to find Dewey standing in the dark, staring at him. The boarding house residents began whispering about the child. One day, Kiên had to leave town for urgent business. He reassured Dewey he'd return soon, but the boy clung to his sleeve, refusing to let go. It took great effort to pry him off. As soon as Kiên left, all hell broke loose in the boarding house. Screams echoed through the halls. Objects flew through the air. The main gate, which had always been flimsy, suddenly became impenetrable, as if sealed by an invisible force. The police arrived, but no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't break the door down. When Kiên returned, he pushed through the crowd and unlocked the gate with his key. As he stepped inside, his blood ran cold. Dewey was floating midair, his lower body fading into nothingness. His expression was hollow, his eyes dark and lifeless. The shaman, who had fled earlier, returned with ritual tools. She hurriedly explained, "This is not just any spirit, it is an old soul, and it has followed you from a past life." Kiên was stunned. The shaman continued, "Dewey is your reincarnated brother from a previous life. He carried an unresolved grudge, which is why he found his way back to you. But now he is consumed by anger." The only way to end this was a ritual, and Kiên had to be the one to lure the spirit in. Taking a deep breath, he stretched his hand toward Dewey, just as he always did when calling him. For the first time, Dewey hesitated. His ghostly body flickered. Then he reached out. The moment their hands touched, a deafening scream tore through the air. Dewey's figure twisted and writhed in agony before slowly dissolving into nothingness. Silence fell over the boarding house. The nightmare was over. Or so Kiên thought. The next morning, as Kiên went to fetch water, a foul stench filled the air. He opened the communal water tank and stumbled backward in horror. Floating inside was the lifeless body of the shaman, her eyes wide open in terror. Before he could react, his phone rang. A relative from his village spoke in a trembling voice. His father, Mr. Hua, had been found dead in the village pond. The deaths mirrored each other too perfectly. As Kiên stood there, gripping his phone tightly, a chilling realization crept over him. This was far from over.